Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this wonderful Friday afternoon. We have a very special segment today. So, in the first segment, we're going to be talking about the Boston Celtics and the Indiana Pacers and their second game. This was game two. The Celtics absolutely blew them out of the water, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. In the second segment, we are going to be talking about the challenge rule. LeBron recently tweeted out how he doesn't agree with the challenge rule, and we'll just talk about the opinions and things of that nature, like what we think about it. Then in the third segment, I'm going to talk about some Cavs drama. As usual, there's more. For some reason, I've never talked about the Cavs this much since LeBron was even on the Cavs. So that's a lot of Cavs talk. And in the fourth segment, we're going to look at some realistic and dream off-season targets for certain stars. We also have a special fifth segment that I will reveal at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please go ahead and use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment that is GSMCPodcast.net. It really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead into the first segment. Now, notice I say we this time instead of I. That's because we have not one, but two guests on this show that I would really like to introduce all of you. So here we have Christopher and Big E. Big E was on this show before, but you guys have not met Christopher yet. And Chris is the fantasy sports podcast host he was recently new and recently acquired. He's a very good guy, very stand-up guy. We love him. Chris, introduce yourself, and I don't think Eric needs to introduce himself. We already know who he
Hello,
is.
everybody. Yes, I am Chris. I will be your GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. So be sure to tune in later on next week when I'll be starting my show. Uh, we already did upload a video yesterday for my first ever show debut. And I'm excited to join Nelson and Eric today to talk some b-ball. Very good game last night between the Pacers and Celtics, and also to talk about this very controversial challenge rule
All
that
right,
I'm pretty
so let's go ahead and go right in. I want to test out this graphic and see how it works and see how it looks on the screen. Oh, it looks beautiful. All that work has paid off. All right. So obviously the Celtics, they completely blew the Pacers out of the water. I saw this coming a mile away. I didn't really. I thought they were going to lose in game two, because that seemed to be the trend for the Celtics throughout the entirety of the postseason. They'd win game one, then they'd lose game two. But then they just, they get it rolling in the rest of the series and they win in five. But that's not what happened. And they had a lot of help with Jaylen Brown. He ended the game with 40 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. They also had some great help from Derek White, who ended the game with 23 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists. So obviously, guys, what do you guys think about this game? Like, what were your thoughts? So we'll start with Eric, since he hasn't talked.
Well, I kind of after game one, I honestly kind of thought that the Boston Celtics were in a little bit of trouble because they were expected to kind of have this game kind of be the first game, kind of game one, and the second game, like you said, game two, they've had the history and the MO of losing it. So I was honestly kind of ready to see Indiana kind of turn it around. There's definitely some more time. They're heading back to Indiana. The game's on Saturday, I think. It's on Saturday. And I don't know. I just think, and they haven't lost at home since March. I think
Yeah, the
I saw
game the
that
game is
somewhere. That's
tomorrow. To answer your
impressive. That's
question.
crazy. Boston, they have to keep it together. So they definitely have. If they want to keep winning, or if they want to make it to the finals, they need to rely on Jaylen Brown, having this type of game, and also Jason Tatum, and kind of just the whole team effort.
Yeah. So now, Chris, what do you think about this game? Did you watch it? Like, I know I watched the
I
entirety.
actually did not watch it, but here's the reason why I'm a huge Celtics fan. And so when I hear like the whole Celtics narrative, especially after game one, about all these pundits coming out in full force and saying, hey, this team is not that competitive and this Pacers can really put up a fight in this series, I'm like, okay. But we in game two proved that, we can really turn it on. Obviously, the past couple of game twos, we really weren't getting it going. So this is a clear benchmark for the Celtics in terms of trying to end this series as soon as possible and like dispel any notions that we're not of a championship mentality. And as soon as we win the championship, I'm just gonna be very happy. But until then, I'm gonna kind of rest on my laurels and not say anything that will, make people angry. So overall, I'm just really happy with this effort. I'm really happy for Jaylen Brown as a whole. Glad that he had a good game after being, in my opinion, snubbed from all NBA teams. So yeah, I just think that this was a very interesting game. Hopefully, the Celtics can complete the sweep. But Indiana's very good at home, as Eric said. So I'm looking forward to how this series shapes out.
Yeah, I mean, so do you want to talk a little bit more about that snubbing? Because I do know you wanted to talk like about the All NBA selections, but I mean, I sort of thought that like obviously Brown, he definitely deserved to be an All NBA. I would have put him over Halliburton. That's just me because like I mean, I've said it before on this podcast that I was going to turn into the biggest Boston Celtics fan just for this series because I don't like Indiana. They're mean, they're evil, they're bullies. I don't like them. They ruined my Knicks. I'm pretty sure Eid like he feels the exact same way about this Pacers team and just wants them gone.
Oh, absolutely. Get him out of here. I'm getting my broom right now for those Celtics.
Oh,
Sweep
he's
them.
calling the sweep. He's calling the sweep
I'm
early. Oh
calling it
no.
sweep.
Uh-oh. What do you think about that,
Uh,
Chris? Do you think
I'm
that's a
gonna,
little
I'm gonna,
bold
I'm
or what do
gonna
you
like rest because Indiana's a very tough team. I'm gonna say that. Obviously they lost Tyrese last night, but overall, I do think that the Celtics are just that much more experienced. They want the chip this year. They deserve the chip this year, in my opinion. One of the best teams in the history of the NBA this year. So I'm not sure about sweep. But I don't want to look too far ahead. But
even
overall, I
with
think that
Tyrese hurt, you're not sure of a sweep?
I just feel like until I see it, I can't believe it in my opinion. So ultimately, I
I'm
can't
so
like.
modest.
And this
My
is
man Chris is so modest. No, I
Yeah,
think the
no, no, no. But
Celtics,
like
they're
to
a
be
great
fair
team.
though, you like you had this. He is a Celtics fan, so this wouldn't be like the first time where he has his hopes up, and then they just they destroy
True,
all of his
yeah.
hopes. So it's like I guess it's just
Yeah,
learning from
that's
past
true.
experience. I mean, I always say that the Celtics are basically the Dallas Cowboys of the NBA, where it's like
Yeah,
every
Ooh.
single
exactly.
or the San Fran or the
Oh, ouch.
49ers if you will, where all the fans they think they have it in the bag, but then
Yep.
when the going gets tough, the team just isn't there. And like that's just what history sort of shows. And the reason why I say like Cowboys is supposed to like San Fran because it's been so long since we've seen like when the Celtics were dominant, it was such a long time ago. Like I mean, even like before most of their championships came way before Larry Bird and like back in when the NBA only had like 16 teams or something like that. And it's like, it's old, similar to how the Dallas Cowboys, their best of the best seasons were 20 something years ago. And it's crazy to think that it's over 20 something years ago, but it's like that's sort of the thought process that I have. But then again, like I say 49ers because they're successful now. Like they're playing really, really well now, similar to how the 49ers get really far as well, but it's just they just miss
Yeah.
it. So it's like one or the other for it's one or the other for me. But so you Chris, you do like fantasy, right? So how did you favor with this? Like this kind of performance from Jalen Brown?
Obviously, I honestly wasn't expecting a huge performance from Jaylen Brown. Obviously, Tatum, in terms of fantasy, is the more scrutinized player, in my opinion. I think that I kind of overlooked Jaylen Brown because of Jason Tatum's importance in fantasy, just because he's expected every game to put up not only huge points in real life, but also in fantasy. So I'm just really glad that Jaylen Brown proved to be the catalyst in this game, kind of proved me wrong. Obviously, I also have to pay attention to the Pacers as well and Tyrese Halliburton, and obviously he got hurt, so I
Yeah.
did not do that great in fantasy wise
And you notice
yesterday.
how Tatum has sort of been like a little lax in the postseason. I don't know if it's like just me, but like his performances are like they're meh or like not what I usually expect Tatum to average. Does that make sense? Like, is that a little
Yeah, that
too
makes
harsh?
sense. Like even in like games where he scores over 30 points, he seems kind of like a little bit tense. It seems like he's trying too hard to like include Jalen Brown saying like, "Oh, it's your turn to like score points." And sometimes that's when the Celtics offense gets its most stagnant, you know what I mean? It's when Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum can't really decide who is the leader in this team, and that's the main issue. There is no one player who's going to step up and say, "Hey, I'm going to lead you to the promised land." You know what I
Oh,
mean?
so
So
do you think
overall,
they're just, do you think they're too nice, or do you think they're too scared? Because like it could be looked at both ways. I mean, like you could, since their chemistry is so good together, it could be looked at, oh, I need to get him involved. Or it could be looked at, and especially with the reputation that Tatum has with his finals performance and how people labeled it as bad, and like they could think that, oh, Tatum is scared. Okay, he's just passing the ball to Jalen Brown. What do you think? Like, what do you think it is?
I think that overall the Celtics are more team based than other, championship caliber teams. I think that they really want to push that narrative, but overall, I kind of feel like at some point if you're facing either the Wolves or the Mavs in the finals, if they get there even, I'm not pushing too hard. I'm not counting my chickens before I hatch. But overall, I think that once you get to that point, someone will need to step up. And it could be Jason Tatum and it could be Jalen Brown like last night. So I'm just hoping that Jason Tatum or Brown decides, hey, look, in order to win a championship, one of us is going to have to like go off for a certain amount of points because that's what they need. The NBA is turning into a more superstar driven league. It's turning into a face of the league kind of league. And right now, the Celtics are the best team in the league, but they don't really have someone who I would call a superstar of the league.
But I mean, you kind of need a team to like to in order to win these playoffs and these finals. And honestly, I feel like the biggest problem with some of the teams that don't win is because they rely on one specific person all too much. And with the way that the Celtics play and them taking a lot of three-pointers, it's really just live and die by the three for them. So I really feel like they could make this dynamic work, and they could definitely make this team ball work, similar to how the Spurs would made team basketball work. I know Eric's a big fan of the Spurs, and how like he sees how Tim Duncan, Manu, and Tony Parker, they were all able to share the ball with each other, and there was no like definitive. I mean, there was, I guess Tim Duncan would be considered like definitive star, but at the same time, Tony Parker won a Finals MVP while Tim Duncan was on the roster. So it's like it's sort of a dynamic that like it's a team-based dynamic that all of them have. So with that, we are out of time for this first segment. So now I will go ahead and wait a minute, there's someone in the chat. Kenneth is in the chat. He says, "Don't forget Tiago Splitter."
Oh, Splitter!
That's a
That's
shout.
my
That's a
man right
shout.
there. I love Splitter.
Oh my lord. That was hilarious. Anyways, so with that, we are out of time for this first segment. So now we will go ahead into the second segment where we are going to challenge. Well, LeBron is going to challenge the challenge rule after his tweet, and we're going to give our opinions on what we think of the challenge rule right after this short break. So stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be talking about the challenge rule and LeBron James' opinion on the challenge rule. Before I begin, however, I'd like to remind everybody to please go ahead and use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. It is gsmcpodcast.net. It really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and talk about the challenge rule and our opinions on it. So first, I would like to read the tweet that LeBron put out there. I'm going to see if I can pull it up on the screen as well without any problems. Let's see. Yes, I did it successfully. Yay me! But anyways, so the LeBron tweeted, he says, have to change that challenge rule. No way you have 2 successful challenges and can't anymore for the rest of the game. Makes absolutely no sense. So what do you guys think of this? We'll start with Eric, since he didn't really talk that much in the last segment. So go right ahead, Eric.
Well, actually, I agree 1,010% with LeBron. The whole challenge rule, just in general, is a little funky, but it's a new rule that the NBA implemented to kind of, help protect, like I was talking with Nelson about yesterday, how we have the technology to make the game better. So therefore, we're going to do whatever it does to, make a good experience for the audience and the fans.
Right.
But
That was my take on it.
Yeah, if you win 2 successful challenges and after that they're like, nope, that sucks too bad. Like, you kind of are you getting rewarded for I don't know. It's like I feel like you're not being rewarded for actually spotting it, and the coaches are, spotting these things that the referees, sometimes they don't catch. Sometimes the referees, they kind of especially during the playoffs, you kind of have the referees swallow their whistle and kind of just let the boys play. You know what I mean? So, and the NBA is a it's a very, very physical game. It's very, very fast. I think it was Bill Russell, don't quote me on this, that said a basketball is a game of mistakes. The team that wins is the team that makes the fewest mistakes. And that makes, and that if you have a magnifying glass constantly watching the game and stuff like that, yeah, I get it. You want to protect the rules, the sanctity of the game. You want the right team to win and not get screwed over. But at the same time, it could be just, I don't know, it's just too much. You stop the game, you stop the momentum. I get it with football and I guess with baseball, because there's breaks, in between football and I think it's a 40-minute play clock. They have to kind of get their stuff together and kind of pick a play, run it, and then the referees have a chance. The game stops. In the NBA and hockey as well, these guys are constantly just running back and forth. It's very physical, very physical. Definitely respect NBA players. And I don't know, it just seems like they're kind of making too much emphasis on the challenge kind of thing. But I do think that LeBron was right. I think they should be awarded a challenge for every single challenge they win or something like that.
But you also said that you don't really like how it slows the game down. So constantly rewarding a team with challenges is just going to slow the game down. How's that going to work?
Yeah, no, that's true as well. But for my opinion, I just kind of hope that they would get rid of the challenge thing altogether. Since they have maybe, I don't know. I don't want the game to slow down. That's one thing why I loved NBA kind of watching and growing up and stuff like that. Like Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal. I watched Gary Payton, the San Antonio Spurs. It was just constant action and just a break in the game. It slows down the momentum. And it's kind of I don't know, because a lot of times NBA coaches, and I've kind of learned this. I played basketball when I was younger. Sometimes you call a timeout to slow the other team down because momentum just builds up, builds up, builds up.
Yes.
You saw
they still do that
Celtics
now.
won a 20-point run. Yeah, you saw the Celtics won a 20-point run, and I don't know. You just don't want to kill the momentum of the game, and I just don't like it. But that's just my opinion.
Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you guys on this one. I'm all of the opinion that you should let the kids play. I'm a huge soccer fan, so also that's another game where you don't want that
that
many
game,
breaks.
it
You want
doesn't
more
stop
action.
whatsoever.
It's more, yeah, it's fast paced, and so I'm with you guys on this one. I think that the barometer for a challenge rule should be the NFL, because that's a game where you can kind of slow the game down. There's not as
Yeah.
much action. There's not as much, fast-paced things happening. But in the NBA, you might miss something and blink. I'm reminded of what
Yeah,
Eric said in the
exactly.
production meeting. So absolutely, I agree that, the challenge rule just kind of slows everything down. And in a game where there's so much happening and going on, I don't think slowing it down to try and go over something that someone might have missed is any good for the game. I
I
think that
mean,
it's kind of
what
ludicrous.
about like in the final minutes where it's like a very important call where like that decides the entire outcome of the game, and it was a completely bad call, like it was a wrong call. What do you guys think about that? Because I'm sort of on the side where it's like challenges should be a thing, but they should only be a thing like late in the game, and it shouldn't be something
Oh my
that's like
God, you read my mind.
100%.
mm,
Yeah, I was thinking about that too.
like
Yeah,
maybe like the
definitely maybe after the
final, I'd say
final.
maybe the final 5 or so minutes of
Yeah.
in the fourth quarter, that's when the challenge should be, that's when teams should be allowed to have a challenge. But like in the beginning of the game, no, because I remember there was, I forgot exactly what game it was, but there was a challenge literally in the first quarter, and I'm like, okay, why are you wasting a challenge in the first quarter? Like that's not a
Exactly.
very smart move. You might need that later if you get it wrong.
Yeah. No, I agree 110%. Yeah, like later on in the game where, minutes are a little more crucial, it'd be ideal. We should start a petition, all of us, Just kidding. No.
Give
But
me the challenge rule.
Big E making the
yeah.
moves already.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't really. It's kind of ironic seeing how this is coming from. I feel like it's a little ironic seeing how this is coming from LeBron, because it's like he'll say one thing, but then he'll say something else. I am a big LeBron fan, but like he'll say this just because it benefits him now, but then later on it's just going. He might regret that in the future, because if you guys remember, he was the one that suggested a play-in tournament, and like the so that it awards like the ninth and the 10th seed, like, a chance to make it into the postseason. And ever since he's been stuck in the play-in tournament, he was like, whoever came up with that idea needs to be fired. I mean, you came up with the idea. Like,
Right.
I am a LeBron fan, but I'm not going to be blind and say that LeBron didn't have any kind of influence on that decision. Like, I don't think they would have added that had he said nothing. That's just me. What do you guys think on that?
I kind of think that LeBron can sometimes get things wrong, but I think in terms of, this specific situation, I think that he definitely has a point. Now, LeBron definitely does say some like crazy things that might get misinterpreted by us kind of people. So overall, I think that in terms of how players view this, I think it's going to be very different from how, you know, media members view this because players are
Mm.
actually interacting with the game and they might actually, like some aspects of it, whereas we kind of disagree with them. So ultimately, I feel like LeBron's just putting it out his own feelings, and it's kind of up to other
And
people to interpret those feelings.
And to be fair, no one better than LeBron to put this out, because he actually he played in both, like the no challenge era and the challenge era. So there's obviously like been moments where in some of the games that he's played in there was several missed calls and he just couldn't do anything about it because there was no challenge. So that's what you guys. So we're all on the collective opinion where it's like, challenge has to be saved towards the final 5 minutes of a game at like the least.
Oh yeah,
We're all in
I
agreement.
agree. No,
All
that's
right.
Absolutely.
Well, you guys, let me know what you guys think in the comments about the challenge rule. If you guys think it's a good thing to have them throughout the entire game, or if you guys think it's a bad thing to have them throughout, like, or it should be something that should be saved for the fourth quarter. But with that, that is all the time we have for this second segment, and therefore that's all the time that we have for these two fine young gentlemen. And say your goodbyes.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Be
Sure to
sure to
tune
tune into the
into,
fantasy
yeah,
podcast as well
yeah,
as the
absolutely.
wrestling podcast, but I'll let you go ahead and say your goodbyes.
All right. Thank you so much for having me, Nelson. This was a great opportunity just to talk about basketball, talk about one of my favorite teams. So, yeah, be sure to tune in, like Nelson said, to my podcast starting up next week. Already a sneak peek preview of what I'm going to be talking about coming up on the show today. So, yeah, absolutely.
All right, Eric, your turn.
My boy. Thank you, Nelson, so much. Always a pleasure, my man. Love talking basketball with you all the time, all day, every day. Tune into the GSMC Wrestling Lawyer podcast. Tonight, we have a pretty big show lined up, so don't miss it. We have a bunch of predictions. We're talking about AEW Double or Nothing. Also, we're going to talk about King and Queen of the Ring in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. So, if you're ready for a hot show, make sure you
And don't
tune in.
forget, what times do your show start?
It starts at 8 p.m. Pacific time and 11 p.m. Eastern time.
All right, and Chris, what about you?
Mine will usually starting next week, 10:30 to 11:30 Eastern Standard Time.
Nice. All right. Well, that's all the time that we have for both of you. So, see ya. Have a good one.
See
See
you.
you guys. Have a good one.
You too, Nelson.
There we go. Bunch of nice people. Be sure to tune into their podcast. So, with that, like I said before, we are out of time for this second segment. So now I will go ahead and go into the third segment where we have, you guessed it, more Cavs drama. So I'll be talking about that right after this short break. So stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are once again talking about Cavs drama. I mean, again, this drama, it's through the roof. Like, there's so many different headlines about the Cavs, and it's all bad news. Like, that's all it has been for the Cavs recently, and it's not looking good for them. I'm just adjusting the light in the background, don't mind me. But I mean, I will say it's very good for me because now I actually have like some other things to talk about, but I am getting a little bit fed up with how much drama there is around the Cavs team, especially like still now after they fired their head coach, because this drama, it's still like talking about their head coach and the problems that JB Bickerstaff sort of had throughout with the Cavs and its locker room. So Marcus Morris, obviously an NBA veteran, he was on the Cleveland Cavaliers. He recently participated on the podcast Run It Back, and he said on the podcast that there was a disconnect between the Cleveland Cavaliers players and head coach JB Bickerstaff. So if you guys remember from the previous podcast that I did, in the third segment of the last live show that I did and the last podcast that I did, I said that Donovan Mitchell was one of the players that had a disconnect with JB Bickerstaff and just didn't agree with the coaching methods and didn't think that, him as a coach would lead the Cavaliers far. And I thought it was just him. Like, I thought it was just Donovan Mitchell that was saying this, and the reason why the Cavs were decided to fire their head coach, JB Bickerstaff, was because of Donovan Mitchell and his disconnect with the coach. Because when you're when you're a team and your star player doesn't have the same agreements as the coach, you can do one of two things. One, get rid of that star player. Two, get rid of the coach. And 9 times out of 10, the organization decides to get rid of the coach and get a new one. Now, I can't really give you the exact number of how many times it's worked out for them, but at the end of the day, I thought that this decision was literally just Donovan Mitchell, influenced by Donovan Mitchell, but I was wrong, and we have more confirmation that it's not just him that believed that JB Bickerstaff was an incompetent coach. So Morris, he joined the Cavs in March. He appeared in 12 games during the regular season and 9 games in the postseason. And as I said before on the podcast, Bickerstaff went 170 to 59 in the excuse me, in the regular season, and 6 out of 11 in the postseason. He only won 6 games in the postseason, so unfortunate for him. And again, he lost to Boston in the second round of the playoffs this year in 5 games. So according to the NBA reporter Jason Lloyd, the Cavaliers star, like Donovan, he was aggravated with Bickerstaff's tactics and strategies. And the quote is, yes, Donovan Mitchell was one of those aggravated by some of Bickerstaff's tactics and strategies. Lloyd wrote, he wasn't alone, but a locker room follows its star. If Mitchell had Bickerstaff's back, everyone else would fall in line. When he didn't, the others fell into that line too. So it would seem that, again, it's still influenced by Donovan Mitchell and his opinions towards the coach. Like, I mean, it's sort of like the mentality of just, like, you know, follow the leader, if that makes sense, which is a little bit, I mean, it makes total sense, because if your star player, if your best player on your team isn't happy with the coach, then you're going to agree with your best player. But at the same time, I feel like people could have, like, you know, thoughts for themselves without seeming to follow like a bandwagon. And I'm very surprised that he says that it's because of Mitchell, where Morris is saying that it's not just Mitchell, it was everybody in the locker room that had a problem. And another quote here is, I heard complaints that Bickerstaff was too hands-on, that he wanted to be in control of everything at practices and shoot-arounds. Players grumbled about playing time, either too much or too little. And hold on a second, too much? The players are complaining about too much playing time? Really? I'm sorry, but in my opinion, with that mentality, you're not going to win anything, no matter what coach you have. Like, the way that this league has turned out, it's turned out so soft to me. I mean, if this was 2010 or like in 2000, you'd have players begging to be in the game like, if this was Kobe, you'd have him begging to be in the game for 48 minutes straight, and him being on the bench is just agony. And now we have people complaining that they're playing for too long. Are you serious? Like, that's the mentality that we're going into this. I think that's incredibly weak. I mean, and obviously, like, you know, this is coming from a New York fan where Josh Hart is used to playing like 46, 48 minutes, and all power to Josh Hart and his quote and because he did say in a postgame that the real workers are the ones that are working at a 9-to-5 job. I'm just playing a basketball game. The least I could do is play 48 minutes. That's not exactly what he said. Like, don't quote me on that. That's not exactly what he said. But it's more or less like along the lines of what he said in the post-game interview. And I'm very surprised that there are complaints about people playing too much. Like, how is it? What? But I digress. So, players grumbled about their playing time, too much or too little. Again, all fairly ordinary and pedantic. That, at least, I have no idea what that word means. I'm not even going to lie to you. The most damning criticism, this is a quote, so pardon me for that language, and the one that sticks is the second half fade most of his teams here experience. So injuries can be blamed for part of it, but he has to wear that one. Now, I don't know exactly what he means by that, but I'm assuming he's talking about like the second half collapse that the teams would experience in some of these games, where, like, you know, they would go in and it would seem like they're playing really well, but towards the second half they just blow it. And part of it is the fault of the players, and the other part is, of course, the fault of the coach and the methods that he uses. But I'm not going to blame either side, because it's like I have no idea what's going on with this Cavs locker room now, and I also have no idea what coach they're planning on bringing to help them win a championship, because that's the ultimate goal for this Cavs team. And Mitchell is under contract for the next season, and he has a $37 million player option for 2025 and 2026. He is eligible to sign a 4-year, $208 million extension this summer. And the Golden State Warriors assistant Kenny Atkinson and the New Orleans Pelicans assistant James Borrego are considered leading candidates to become the next head coach for the Cavs. So Atkinson, he coached the Brooklyn Nets and went 118-170 in the regular season and 1-4 in the playoffs. And I mean, all these coaches, they're just the coaches that they have next in line are just as mediocre, if not worse, than the previous coach that they had. I mean, as a Nets fan and the Atkinson as a coach, no, get him away from me. And meanwhile, Borrego as a head coach, he was 148-183 with the Magic and the Charlotte Hornets. So again, like all of these records, they're not as good or even at like on par with JB Bickerstaff's record with the Cavs. But at the same time, you still need like a new formula, because if the players aren't happy with the coach, then the players aren't going to play well. Players don't play well, then you're back to square one with Cleveland. And Cleveland does not want to go back to square one where they were in the absolute worst position possible, where it seemed like they were going to be nothing without LeBron James several times, actually. I mean, since 1993, that was the last time that the Cavs made it to the second round. 1993, not counting this previous season. So, they do not want to go back there. But with that, we are out of time for this third segment. So now I will go ahead and go into the fourth segment, where I talk about realistic and dream off-season targets for certain teams. And I will be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned for that.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be talking about some realistic and dream off-season targets for some teams. Now, this is a list that comes from Bleacher Report, and I'm just going to give my opinions on, the people on this list and where I think they could end up in this off-season, as well as, if it's a dream, if it's reality, this, that, and the other. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the list right now. Let me see if I can do it. No, that's the wrong one. There we go. That's much better. All right. So we have this slideshow. So the first star that I'm going to bring up is Trae Young. So obviously Trae Young, he was in, wait a second. The text is, you guys can't see it on the audio side, but the text is looks a little bit weird on the display title there. There we go. Just adjusted that. So Trae Young. Obviously, Trae Young has been involved in several trade talks, and there's growing questions on, what team he's going to end up on. People are saying he could end up on the Spurs, the Lakers, and obviously, like everyone is, whenever the Lakers need a star, it's like every single star is up for grabs for LA. It's kind of ridiculous, but honestly, Trae Young does seem to be a realistic option for the Lakers. I mean, they do have the pieces that they can trade away to get him, and it wouldn't be a bad fit to have Trae Young on the same team as LeBron and Anthony Davis. And that is the more realistic option. Now, the fantasy option would be Donovan Mitchell, because Donovan Mitchell, he's asking for a lot of money. He's going to ask for a huge contract, a huge Supermax deal, and needing to pay both LeBron and Anthony Davis, on top of needing to pay $200 million for Donovan Mitchell, it seems a little bit unrealistic to me. So I personally do not think that the Lakers have a single chance of landing Donovan. And like I think it's just all dreams, smoke and mirrors at this point, because this is usually what the Lakers do in the off season. They hype up they either hype up the fact that they can get a specific free agent. They did that with Kyrie Irving. They did that with Kawhi Leonard. They did that with Paul George. They did that with so many stars in the past, and they all eventually end up not being true. Like you'll see everywhere on the internet just fantasy jersey swaps where it's just random star players in a Lakers jersey, and it's just like, ooh, we could possibly get this guy. Ooh, we could possibly get this guy. Oh, maybe we can get this guy. And not only that, Twitter is also loaded with people that make fantasy trades that they think would work and they think GMs would accept, when in reality it's just an egregious trade and definitely would not work. So that's one. So Trae Young is one star whom I believe is going to probably leave, and that's a realistic option for the Cavs. Now, for the Golden State Warriors, now their dream option is, you guessed it, Mr. Kevin Durant, the Snake, the one and only, the man that ruined my Brooklyn Nets and stepped on the three-point line when he was taking that shot over PJ Tucker in Game 7. Where do I even begin with Kevin Durant? I mean, the realistic option for the Golden State Warriors in free agency is honestly Alec Burks. Like, he's a player, he's a forward from the Knicks. He's a very good scorer, in my opinion, like, for the position that he plays and, like, for the role that he has on the Knicks. He's a very consistent scorer, and he would be a very valuable option for the Golden State Warriors to have. But obviously, as a dream, you would rather have Kevin Durant back on your roster, and because obviously Kevin Durant won his only 2 championships with the Golden State Warriors when he was one of their options on a ridiculously stacked team. And this is it's called a dream scenario, but honestly I call it a nightmare scenario, because if this happens again, I swear if this happens again where Kevin Durant just decides to go back to Golden State, I am going to be so absolutely livid, because it's like, please win a championship without those guys. You cannot be that guy when you're playing with those guys. That's just not how it works. And his career in the postseason, if you take away his time with Golden State, it's extremely disappointing. Extremely disappointing. I mean, even like we'll start with OKC. Like he lost in the finals to LeBron James, and I mean he was a young player, so I mean it makes sense how they lose. Then as he matures, he blows a 3-1 lead to the Golden State Warriors when he had it like in the bag. Then he decides to join that Warriors team, wins his championships. Then he decides to leave in hopes of winning a real championship, only to join another super team in the Brooklyn Nets with, James Harden and Kyrie Irving. Only makes it to the second round. And then in the next year, when it was just him and Kyrie, they get swept by the Boston Celtics in the first round after having a horrible Game 2. Then when the going got tough, he decided to leave the Brooklyn Nets and join the Phoenix Suns, where they then lose in Game 6 at home to the Denver Nuggets, the eventual champions, in embarrassing fashion. And then this year, where they lose to the Timberwolves and they get swept. Like, it's been disappointing for Kevin Durant. Everything has not gone his way whatsoever. And honestly, I say this is karma. This is just karma. Like, this is what happens when you essentially sell your soul for the rings. Because that's what he did. Like, in my eyes, that's exactly what he did. He sold his soul for those championships. But aside from that, let's move on to the next free agent, which is Paul George. So there's a possibility that he could join the Sixers. I think that's a very likely possibility. The Sixers, they have enough cap space. They do have the ability to offer a max to Paul George if the Clippers do not offer it to him. Now, another landing spot a dream landing spot would be OKC. I'm sure a lot of Oklahoma City Thunder fans would love to have Paul George back on the roster. He had one of his best seasons with the Thunder. He was I believe he was third in MVP voting when he was on the Thunder at one point. And again, he was a very, very valuable player for the team, despite the fact that he was only able to make it as far as the first round. But a more realistic option for the Thunder would be Isaiah Hartenstein from the Knicks. It seems like everybody wants to just steal all the Knicks players from me, but aside from that, Isaiah Hartenstein would be a very good option for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and it's a much more realistic option because that would be a lot of money that you have to give to Paul George, and I don't really think they're willing to give up that much money for Paul George. Now, next player on the list is DeMar DeRozan. Now, I talked about DeMar. I talked about DeMar in the previous segment, how he was a little bit bitter with the Raptors and trading him, and I do feel bad for him. Excuse me, in that sense, but now a realistic spot, a dream spot for him would probably be the Clippers. I mean, DeMar on the Bulls, it's been a little bit underwhelming. Like, they haven't really done much. They've just been mid. And it's nowhere near the same success that he was able to achieve on Toronto. And if Paul George decides to leave in free agency and go to decide to go to a different team, I feel like the Clippers would be a dream spot for him. He is from Los Angeles, and he obviously, I don't think he would mind playing in his own city, which would be a very nice change of pace for him. But a much more realistic option for the Clippers would be Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield, he's on the Sixers, and I wouldn't be surprised, if Paul George decides to go to the Sixers, that the Clippers decide to acquire Buddy Hield in not a replacement role, but as someone that comes off the bench and can shoot the three ball very, very consistently. And that's really all I have. I'm not entirely sure, the situation with the Chicago Bulls. There's barely any kind of coverage on the Bulls as it is, let alone how DeMar DeRozan feels being on the Bulls and everyone else's opinion of the Bulls, and whether or not they're going to run it back again and again and again. Now, the next star is going to surprise you. LeBron James. So, LeBron, a dream selection, a team that would dream of having him, would be the 76ers. I mean, there was, when LeBron, in 2018, when he was going on that ridiculous postseason run, and he ended up going into free agency, a lot of people were questioning exactly where he wanted to go in that free agency, and nobody would have really expected them to be no one expected him to join the Lakers. I mean, there was a lot of optimism that he would join the Lakers, but nobody really thought about that, if that makes sense. And a lot of people thought he was going to join the Sixers because the Sixers looked like they had a much better young core and a much brighter future than the Lakers did with the squad that they had. And obviously, if the Sixers get LeBron, this is a dream scenario. I don't see this happening whatsoever. They have a much better chance of getting Paul George than they do getting LeBron. That is a much more realistic option. The Sixers seeking Paul George. That's my thoughts on that. So, next on the list is honestly quite obvious. And hold on just one second. I'm just pulling up the list again, which will be Darius Garland. Now, obviously, we know that the Cavs and their drama, it's reached a very high peak right now. And it's come to the point where Darius Garland is you either choose between Donovan Mitchell or you choose between me. And obviously, if you're the Cleveland Cavaliers, you're going to choose Donovan Mitchell. So the way I see it, there's the one spot that would be really good for him, and is honestly and it is a dream scenario that I'm talking about, is the Pelicans. I don't know if the Pelicans will have the money that they need to be able to pay Darius Garland the contract that he wants. But him being on the Pelicans, I feel like that would open up a lot for CJ. That would be a very good pairing to have a young guard to be paired up with, Brandon Ingram, Zion, and CJ McCollum. Especially when he's not the same scorer that I thought he was going to be, or he's not like a like I mean I thought he was going to be like a 21, 22 point per game scorer, but in reality he wasn't. And I know he was only a few points off of that 20 point per game average, but I'm being generous when I say 22. I really, at the beginning, I thought 25 points per game, along with, maybe 7 or 6 assists. Again, just being generous, but I expected a lot more from Garland. And the fact that he was a little bit underwhelming, I don't see him as like a number 2 option. So I feel like a team like the Pelicans, where they have several options, would best suit him. But a more realistic target for the Pelicans would most likely be Malik Monk. And Malik Monk, he's the 6th man, and obviously he is a 6th man, and he's a very, very good option as the 6th man. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up getting into the starting lineup with Actually, no. I feel like he'll be a much better option for the Pelicans coming off of the bench. Because he's had much better experience coming off the bench. He's also a much better, just a much better player coming off of the bench. So that's all I have for this 4th segment and the dream scenarios. So with that, we will go ahead and go into the 5th segment, where I talk about what Draymond Green and Shaq had to say on the podcast about their respective championship teams. So I will be right back after this short break. And we are back with the 5th segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this segment, we are going to talk about the Shaq and Draymond Green. They debated on a podcast talking about their respective championship teams. Now, I know the 2016 Warriors did not win a championship, but they did win 73 games, and they were the exact same team that won the championship in 2015. So it's more or less the exact same team. And to be honest, I really don't. Oh, wait, hold on just one second before I go into this topic. Lil Fettuccine, that's a nice name, has a question: is Boston gonna sweep? And we talked about this in the first segment, and Eric, who hosts the wrestling podcast, he thinks that the Celtics are going to sweep. And to be honest, I think that they will too, if Tyrese Halliburton doesn't return in any of these previous games. I think that the Celtics have already shown that they completely outmatched the Pacers. And, but then again, with the way that my picks have been going, I might just be completely wrong and they'll lose the next game at home. The Pacers are a very good team when they play at home, so I'm not incredibly optimistic about the sweep, but Big E is 100, Eric is definitely, incredibly optimistic about that sweep. So I'd say again, if Halliburton isn't in the series, then yes, I think the sweep is going to happen. But if he does play in the series, and if he does come back from going down in game 2, I wouldn't be surprised if the Pacers end up winning at least one game in this series. But yeah, I think the Celtics, they're going to give him the belt. They're going to get him out of here. And again, just no shocker to me if they do. So if you want to hear more about what we had to say about that game, you can watch the video that I'm going to upload soon. After I do this live stream, it's literally the first segment where we talk about the game and what we think is going to happen. And Chris is a Boston fan, so definitely could hear some of his opinions. And Fettuccine has another thing in the chat. The 2016 Warriors can't compare to the 2000 Lakers. Shaq and Kobe were on God mode back in the day. And, that is true. And I do understand that take. But you also have to look at it from the other perspective. Because, the reason why I'm talking about this is because Draymond and Shaq, they brought this up. And they were talking about their respective championship teams. And they both brought up some really good points, because Shaq was thinking, who is going to guard me, and don't say Andrew Bogut. But I think the biggest difference that those Lakers are going to have to adjust to is the defensive schemes, because back then in 2000s, the NBA teams, they were only able to play man. And if you're doubling, you had to commit to that double. You can't hedge, you can't play zone, you can't do any of that. But if they were to play against the Warriors with their defensive strategy and their defensive scheme, that would mean that the Warriors could implement zone on them. It depends on the rules that we're going to follow as well. Are we going to use the modern rules where you can allow zone to be played? Because I think the Lakers would 100% struggle if they played in zone. If they played a defense that was primarily playing in zone. Because the lineup that the Lakers had with Derek Fisher, Kobe Bryant, Rick Fox, Horace Grant, and of course Shaquille O'Neal. Horace Grant was not a good shooter. He just wasn't. And having two paint presences in a zone defense is not ideal. Granted, this is Shaq we're talking about, so I'm sure Shaq would make do with what is given to him. But another thing that should also be taken into consideration is the amount of three-pointers that the 2016 Warriors shot, as opposed to the amount of three-pointers that the Lakers shoot. Now, obviously, with Shaq in the paint getting guaranteed twos 9 out of 10 times, there's a good chance that they wouldn't need to take that many three-pointers when matching up against each other. But I am a little bit, I am questioning in my mind, how would the zone defense fare against this Lakers team? Because we weren't able to see a team play zone against this Lakers team. It was then that's what gave Shaq such a huge advantage. The fact that Shaq would mainly let me rephrase that. Defenders that are guarding Shaq would be forced to play a one-on-one, and forcing Shaq to pass would be the most ideal play. And if you have a zone, that just makes it a lot easier to force Shaq to pass. And on top of that, the three-pointers that the Warriors shoot compared to the three-pointers that the Lakers shoot, if you do the math, shooting threes, if you make the threes and they're making twos, the team that's making threes is eventually going to come out with that lead. And that's just simple math. Now, the 2016 Warriors is a little bit more questionable to me. Now, the 2017 or 2018 Warriors, I have a feeling that that Warriors team would beat the Lakers team no problem. Simply because, I understand that the Lakers were good. They came one game away from sweeping the entire league. But that 2017 Warriors team also came one game away from sweeping the entire league. And they had to play a 7-game series throughout the entirety of the postseason, where in 2001 the Lakers, they only had to play in a 5-game series against in the first round, because back then it was the rules were you had to win 3 games. It was a best of 5, not a best of 7 in the first round, and then the rules eventually changed. So, but that Warriors team in 2017, they came one game away from sweeping the entire league, and the one game that they lost was when the Cavs shot better from the 3 than they did. And Steph Curry and Klay Thompson played rather poorly in that game as well. But with that team, the 2017 Warriors, I think they would win against the Lakers hands down. Kevin Durant on the roster, along with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and the rest of the players that are coming off of the bench, that is so many three-pointers that is really difficult to come back from. And I know the Lakers, they have tremendous defense, but I mean, you could put a hand up in Curry's face and it's not going to do anything. You could put a hand up in Klay's face and 9 times out of 10 it's not going to do anything. And you can't put a hand up in Kevin Durant's face. I mean, Rick Fox guarding Kevin Durant or Horace Grant guarding KD, I don't know what he would do to them. But like, that's just me and that's my take on it. Granted, it could go either way, which is why I picked the 2016 Warriors, because, you know, it's a much more even matchup than the 2017 Warriors. And one thing that Shaq talked about was who's going to guard Kobe. And I mean, Klay Thompson, people tend to forget, but Klay Thompson was a very well-respected 3-and-D defender. And again, like most of the time, the best players and the best guards would be guarded by Klay Thompson. And obviously, you know, Kobe on Klay Thompson, it sounds like, you know, a cakewalk for Kobe. But I wouldn't be surprised if Klay makes his life a little bit difficult. I mean, we saw how Kobe played in 2004, where he was missing a lot of difficult shots, and Kobe takes a lot of difficult shots. So there's no telling, like, just how good they're going to play. And it's a toss-up for me, to be honest, because so many things can happen. And, Lil Fettuccine, he has one more question. So who's winning the finals? Honestly, no idea. It depends on who makes it out of the next round. So I have the Celtics making it to the finals. If the Celtics match up against the Mavericks, I have a feeling that the Celtics are going to win in that matchup. But if they match up against the Timberwolves, I have a feeling that the Timberwolves are going to win in that matchup, simply because the Timberwolves' defense is going to be on par with the Celtics' offense. And with the Mavericks, I feel like their offense is a little bit unpredictable, especially when they go up against a really good defense. Granted, I mean, the Timberwolves, they have I'm really not entirely sure. Like, I'm not even gonna lie to you. It's really difficult to pinpoint exactly like which team is going to win the finals. But I'm sorry, but I feel a little bit more lenient on the Western Conference teams more so than the Celtics. I mean, the Celtics, they just, whenever anyone puts faith in them, they lose. Like, it's happened so many times throughout history. Whenever anyone puts faith in the Celtics, they lose. And I have a really difficult time in trusting the Celtics. And I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, any of the Western Conference teams beat the Celtics in the finals. But that's basically like my opinions on that. And I feel like the West, whichever team comes out of the West, is going to end up winning the championship. That is my take. But with that out of the way, I mean, that's basically all that we have for the 5th segment, and that's it for the show. So thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And as usual, please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. It is gsmcpodcast.net. It really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. That is all we have for today on this show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care. See you next week.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't